My greedy in-laws tried to trick me into signing over my house, smiling, "We're just helping you with some paperwork." When I read the fine print and exposed their plan, they screamed, "You owe us for marrying into this family." The next day, they showed up with suitcases, only to find the locks changed and their names removed from my emergency contacts. After my husband, Mark, passed away suddenly, I was left alone in our home in the Laketown neighborhood of Springfield, Illinois. We had no children, and my closest relatives were Mark's brother, David, and his wife, Susan. In the weeks following Mark's death, David and Susan were supportive, frequently visiting and offering help. Their presence was comforting during such a difficult time. One afternoon, David and Susan came over with a stack of documents. Susan said, "We know handling all this paperwork alone is tough. We've brought some forms to help sort out Mark's affairs." Their thoughtfulness touched me. As we sat in the living room, they presented various documents, explaining each one. Among them was a particularly lengthy form. David said, "This one is just a standard procedure to consolidate the property under your name. It'll make things simpler for you." Susan nodded in agreement, adding, "We're just helping you with some paperwork." Their reassurance eased my apprehensions. Trusting them, I picked up my pen. As I was about to sign, a nagging feeling prompted me to read the document more closely. The legal jargon was dense, but as I deciphered the clauses, I realized the document wasn't transferring the property to my name. It was transferring ownership to David and Susan. They were attempting to take my home. I looked up, my heart pounding. "David, Susan, can you explain this clause here?" I pointed to the section detailing the transfer of ownership. Their expressions shifted subtly. David cleared his throat. "It's just legal terminology. Nothing to worry about." But I wasn't convinced. "It seems to say that I'm granting you ownership of the house. Is that correct?" Susan's smile faltered. "Well, technically yes. But it's for your benefit. We're family, and we want to ensure you're taken care of." I felt a surge of betrayal. "So, by taking care of me, you mean taking my house?" David's tone hardened. "After all we've done for you, you owe us for marrying into this family." Tears welled up in my eyes, not from sadness, but from disbelief. "I think it's time for you both to leave." They left in a huff, leaving the documents behind. That night, sleep eluded me. The weight of their betrayal pressed heavily on my heart. By morning, clarity emerged from the turmoil. I needed to protect myself. First, I contacted my attorney, Mr. Thompson, explaining the situation. He commended me for not signing the document and advised immediate action. Following his counsel, I changed the locks on my doors and updated my home security system. I also revised my emergency contacts, removing David and Susan. The next day, David and Susan arrived with suitcases in hand. Susan's face lit up with a saccharine smile. "We've decided to move in to help you out during this tough time." I stood firm at the doorway. "I'm sorry, but that's not going to happen." David's face turned red. "You can't do this. We're family." "Family doesn't try to steal from one another," I replied, my voice steady. "Please leave." They protested, but I remained resolute. Eventually, they left, hurling accusations and insults over their shoulders. In the weeks that followed, I distanced myself from David and Susan. The pain of their betrayal lingered, but I found solace in the support of friends and neighbors. I also joined a local support group for widows, where I met others who had faced similar challenges. Sharing my story and hearing theirs helped me heal. One evening, while attending a community event, I ran into an old friend, Linda. We hadn't seen each other in years, but we quickly reconnected. Our friendship blossomed, and she became a pillar of support. Through her, I learned the importance of surrounding oneself with genuine, trustworthy people. Reflecting on the ordeal, I realized the importance of vigilance, even with family. Trust is invaluable, but so is self-preservation. I emerged from the experience stronger, more aware, and determined to protect the life and home that Mark and I had built together. A few days after they left, things went quiet. Too quiet. I figured they'd lick their wounds and stay away after getting caught. I was wrong. First, I noticed weird things. Mail missing. A package I was expecting? Gone. I checked the door camera footage. Someone walked up, hooded, grabbed it, and left. Couldn't see a face. Then came the phone calls. Private number. Silence on the other end. One night, someone knocked on the door at 2 a.m. I didn't answer, but I looked through the peephole. No one was there. That's when I got the email. It came from a random address. No subject line. Just a message, "You're not safe alone." I felt sick. I forwarded it to my lawyer and went straight to the police. They said they couldn't do much with just a message and no direct threat. Still, I filed a report and added extra cameras to the backyard and garage. I also started sleeping with my phone next to me and the lights on in the hallway. Then it escalated. Susan showed up at my work. I work part-time at the local library, easy hours, peaceful. She came in like a casual visitor, smiled like nothing had happened. She walked right up to the desk. "I just want to talk," she said, almost whispering. "We can fix this." I stood up slowly. "There's nothing to fix." Her face twitched. "You think you're safe now? You think this is over?" One of my coworkers stepped in. Susan walked off before security came. That night, I found a flat tire on my car. Not just one too. Slashed. I called the police again. Reported it. They said they'd make a note. That's it. A note. I was shaking every night, jumping at sounds, afraid to even take the trash out after dark. Then David made his move. I got served with papers. They were suing me, claiming that Mark had promised them the house in exchange for helping him with his business, and that I was trying to steal it from them after his death. It was outrageous. Mark never had a formal business with them. They barely spoke before his heart attack. He didn't leave them anything in his will. But still, they dragged me into court. And that's when I saw what their real plan was. Not just to take the house, to destroy me financially. Force me to spend everything I had on legal fees, wear me down, until I had nothing left and had to sell. They wanted me gone and the house for themselves. All of it. The stress was unbearable. I started getting tension headaches. My appetite vanished. I lost 15 pounds in a month. People at work noticed. Even worse, someone, probably them, had started spreading rumors about me. That I had a gambling problem. That I was mentally unstable. That I was using Mark's death for sympathy and trying to cut out his real family. The worst part? Some people believed them. People I had known for years suddenly went quiet. I saw the looks, the pity, the doubt, and all I had was the truth. My lawyer was fighting for me, but I could tell this was going to be a long, ugly process. They had no shame, no conscience. They were willing to lie under oath. David claimed Mark promised him the house on his deathbed. There was no deathbed, he died in his sleep. Susan cried on the stand. I nearly screamed. They were playing dirty, and they were good at it. But I wasn't about to let them win. I started keeping records of everything. I printed every message, screenshot every suspicious call log. I hired a private investigator. Used what was left of my savings. I had him dig through everything. That's when the first real break came. The investigator found a document. A fake letter, supposedly written by Mark, saying he was grateful to David and Susan, and wanted them to have the house if anything ever happened. The letter was full of legal-sounding phrases. But the signature? It wasn't even close to Mark's real one. We submitted it to the court. But they denied everything. Susan said, I don't know how that got there. David said, maybe Mark wrote it quickly. He was under stress. I wanted to scream. But the judge agreed to have the handwriting analyzed. Waiting for those results felt like hanging from a thread. I kept to myself, barely leaving the house. I was afraid they'd try something else. I started checking my doors 3 times before going to bed. One night, the alarm went off at 3:17 a.m. Back door. Broken latch. I didn't see anyone when the cops came. But the window was pried open. They filed it as attempted break-in. I knew it was them. They were trying to scare me. Shake me. Make me leave before the case ended. But I stayed. I told my lawyer we weren't backing down. And then, the handwriting report came in. What happened next changed everything. The handwriting report confirmed what I already knew. The letter was forged. Not only did it not match Mark's handwriting, but the forensic expert testified that it looked like it had been copied and traced sloppily. The ink wasn't even consistent with the type of pen Mark typically used. It was damning. My lawyer submitted a motion to dismiss the entire claim based on fraud. We thought it was over. We thought that would be the end of it. But then the judge did something unexpected. He didn't dismiss the case. He said the fraud allegation needed a separate hearing. That meant more delays, more money, more court dates, and worst of all, it meant David and Susan got more time to keep playing their game. I was furious, but I held it together. Barely. Then came the phone call. It was from a woman I didn't know. Her voice was shaky. Is this Rebecca? Yes, I said. I think I need to tell you something. I used to work for Susan. My stomach dropped. She told me her name was Monica. She was a part-time caretaker Susan had hired to help with her elderly aunt 2 years ago. She had quit after only 4 months because, in her words, Susan was manipulative, cruel, and talked constantly about money that wasn't hers yet. Then Monica said something that changed everything. One time, Susan got drunk and bragged that her sister-in-law was a soft target and that she was going to get the house one way or another. I didn't know what she meant back then, but I saw your name on the news about the court stuff and I felt sick. I asked if she would be willing to give a statement. She hesitated, but said yes. We brought her in. My lawyer recorded a signed affidavit. It wouldn't be a silver bullet, but it helped paint a clearer picture, especially paired with the forged letter and break-in report. Things were starting to turn in my favor. But just when I thought the worst had passed, I got a visit from a social worker. Apparently, someone had filed an anonymous tip saying I was suffering from dementia and was unfit to live alone. The report said I was frequently confused, unable to care for myself, and a danger to myself and possibly others. I almost laughed. Almost. But I didn't. Because it wasn't funny. It was an attempt to declare me mentally unfit, which, legally, could make it easier for someone else to gain control over my property. My house, my money, my life. The social worker was kind. She interviewed me, walked through the house, asked some basic cognitive questions. By the end of it, she looked embarrassed. I'm sorry for this, she said. This clearly doesn't match what was reported. You're sharp. You're independent. I'll file a closure on this immediately. I nodded, thanking her, holding back tears. I knew exactly who sent that tip. And this time, I wasn't going to sit back and just react. I made a decision. I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to fight back, legally and publicly. I met with a local journalist who covered small-town corruption and scandals. I laid it all out. The fake letter, the lawsuit, the harassment, the false tip, the break-in, Monica's statement. He asked for documentation. I gave him a stack. He verified everything and ran the story 2 weeks later. The headline? Family feud over widow's home leads to forgery, lies, and alleged elder abuse. It exploded. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Some people from the community apologized to me. Others shared their own stories of being manipulated by David or Susan over the years. Turns out, this wasn't the first time they'd tried to get money through guilt and lies. Just the first time they got caught in the spotlight. Susan called me that night. I didn't pick up. She left a voicemail, screaming, cursing. You destroyed our lives. All I did was tell the truth. The judge called for an emergency hearing to reevaluate the case after the article went public. But even with everything turning in my favor, I stayed cautious. I didn't trust that it was over. Then another twist hit. Monica went missing. She was supposed to testify. Her phone was off. Her apartment empty. Her boss said she never showed up for work. We were terrified something had happened to her. The police got involved. 3 days later, they found her. She was okay, just hiding out at a friend's house. But not without reason. She said someone had followed her car, taken pictures, left a note on her windshield that read, "Shut your mouth or else." She was scared out of her mind. But she didn't back down. She testified anyway. When she walked into that courtroom, I felt a knot in my chest unwind just a little. The courtroom was packed. David looked furious. Susan looked like she was trying to cry, but nothing was coming out. And the judge, he finally looked like he'd had enough. Still, the final decision hasn't come down yet. The case is still technically active. I'm still living in my house, but every knock on the door, every flicker of the lights at night, still makes me jump. They haven't won. But I don't feel like I've won either. Not yet. The final hearing came faster than I expected. Everything led up to this, months of stress, fear, and fighting. David and Susan showed up dressed like saints. David wore a navy suit, probably rented. Susan was in beige, pretending to be fragile, like she was the one who had been wronged. They avoided my eyes. I sat across the room with my lawyer. We didn't speak much. Just waited. The judge walked in. He looked tired. Maybe fed up. I've reviewed all evidence, witness statements, and prior testimonies, he said. This court finds the plaintiffs, David and Susan, have not only failed to prove their claim, but have acted in bad faith. There is clear evidence of forgery, harassment, and an attempt to manipulate the legal system for financial gain. My heart pounded so hard I could barely hear the rest. Effective immediately, the lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I am referring this case to the district attorney's office for possible criminal charges. Susan gasped like someone had punched her. David tried to stand, then sat back down when the bailiff moved toward him. It was over. They lost. Publicly, legally, and completely. But that wasn't the end. The DA picked it up fast. Within weeks, David and Susan were both charged with fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and filing false reports. They were also being investigated for harassment and tampering with a witness. The witness tampering charge came from Monica's testimony about the threat she received. She handed over the note and video from a nearby gas station camera, David's car parked across the street from her job. David was arrested first. Susan tried to run. She made it 2 towns over before they picked her up at a cheap motel, still wearing her fake pearls. When the news aired footage of their arrest, it felt surreal. Neighbors I hadn't talked to in months brought flowers. One old friend I hadn't seen in years hugged me so tight I almost cried. They told me, "You were right the whole time." I'm so sorry I doubted you. Even the social worker who came to my house months ago wrote me a letter. But here's the part one didn't expect. I wasn't done either. For months, I held everything in. Tried to keep it together. Be strong. Be smart. But I made mistakes too. I trusted people I shouldn't have. I waited too long to read the paperwork. I let fear silence me in the beginning. That stops now. I decided to sue them back. Not just for legal fees, which were a lot, but for emotional distress, defamation, attempted theft, and endangering my safety. My lawyer filed the civil suit the day after their arraignment. Monica joined the suit too. The court froze David and Susan's assets while the criminal trial moved forward. Turns out, they were broke. Over $100,000 in debt. That's why they wanted the house so badly. They needed to sell it to pay off credit cards, a personal loan they had lied to get, and a car Susan had leased to look more respectable. Everything unraveled fast. Their friends abandoned them. Even their own daughter, yes, they had a daughter I barely knew, called me and apologized. She said, "They've done this to other people, just never this bad." I'm so sorry. I told her, "It's not your fault." But thank you. The criminal trial ended 3 months later. Guilty. David got 3 years. Susan got 18 months. Both were fined. Both now have records. And me? I got my house. I got my peace. And I got something I didn't expect, respect. People who saw me as weak before started to see me as something else, someone who didn't break. I kept every document, every letter, every video. I boxed it up and labeled it in black marker. They tried to take everything. It sits in my closet. I don't look at it much. But I keep it. To remind me that people who smile at you while trying to take what's yours aren't family. They're a warning. And next time, I'll see them coming.